later. So thank you very much for joining. This is the Adelaide Tableau User Group in November 2023 from the wonderful city of Adelaide in Australia, South Australia. My name is Rob. As usual, I'm your host for today. We have, let me just get this details. There's my details. I was just saying to the guys who were presenting, Julia, that's when I first started at DataSpark. I was looking pretty fresh-faced and happy, and well, you've probably seen what I look like now. I'm pretty weathered, but that's my details. We've got Marion, who will be presenting first off, followed by wonderful Julia. There's Marion, she's a customer success and data analytics, and Marion will be doing 5 things about advertising and information design, followed by the wonderful Julia from DataSpark, who is in ways in which we can utilize third-party tools. So, without further ado, Marion, if I stop sharing my screen, you share yours. If you're happy to take away, we'll go from the top.
Sounds good. Okay, so let me try this. Can you see my screen now? Perfect. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be invited in this user group and to talk about all things Tableau. In this session, I'm actually not going to talk so much about how to do things in Tableau. I'm going to talk about dashboard design and how to communicate effectively through data. Before I start, let me tell you a bit more about myself. I'm a data and analytics professional working in customer success. I actually started using Tableau a long time ago in the early 2010s and absolutely fell in love with the product and really fell in love as well with the art of visualizing data. I also taught Tableau many years later, and I didn't only teach about Tableau, but also taught about visualization design and data storytelling. But there's something you need to know about me, something else. Before working in data and analytics, I used to work in advertising and graphic design. I actually studied advertising and then joined a creative department in an ad agency. My role was to come up with advertising campaigns on different mediums. So you might be wondering, how do you go from working in advertising, which feels such like a different industry, to teaching about data and data visualization? Well, I actually thought a lot about this and the process you go through when designing an ad, and also the process you go through when you create data visualization and dashboards. And simply put, these two fields are forms of communication. So you're trying to get a message across. So if you're making an ad, you're going to obviously try to sell something and communicate something about the product. But if you're working with the data visualization in dashboard, you're also going to try to communicate something. So it will be insights, information. So in both fields, you need to communicate things very effectively to get your message across. So it's all about effective communication. So what makes communication effective? Well, in my view, there's 3 things. First and foremost, I understand it with minimum effort. I don't need someone to really explain it to me. If there are some instructions needed, these are provided to me. I can actually work it out on my own. Second thing is, well, I got something. If it's effective, I'm going to get something out of it. Like the intended message is clear. And if it's really, really, really effective, I'm going to remember it. So let me share 5 things I've learned in advertising that helped me in communicating effectively through data and building effective dashboards. Okay, so thing number 1 is you need to know your audience. What you learn in advertising is that all communication has a specific audience. You never design something that is made for everyone. That just doesn't work. And when you work with data visualization and dashboard design, the same rules apply. So as a dashboard designer, you need to get into the shoes of your audience. So by fully understanding who is your audience, what the audience is trying to do, and how they're going to consume the insights, you're going to gain valuable information that will help you shaping the dashboard and prioritize certain features. One key aspect I like to raise here is when creating dashboards is also gaining an understanding of your audience data literacy and data habits. So for example, if you're designing a dashboard for someone who's been looking at tables for years, you might tailor your approach accordingly and start by creating something rather basic and educate your audience along the way. Okay, number 2, in advertising and design, less is more. You need to achieve simplicity, because if it's simple, it's going to be effective. So the first tip I want to give is that less is more also apply to dashboard design and data visualization design. But look, there's a catch to this. Actually, achieving simplicity is actually harder than it seems. It's difficult and time consuming. So if you think about the field of data visualization, to make something that is in essence complex is actually not easy. So you're going to have to spend some time on it. So the more, what I can tell you is the more time you invest in keeping things simple, the better the dashboard is going to look. I don't know if you know David McCandless. He's an author, data journalist, and information designer. He used to work across print, advertising, TV, and web. He became really famous for his blog and a book called Information is Beautiful that was published in 2009. That book is dedicated to visualizing ideas, issues, knowledge, and data. So if you haven't come across this book, I really recommend you to have a look. It's absolutely wonderful and really inspiring in the way you can communicate with data. I just want to put out there this quote because I think that captures really well what design is about. And if you think about design, it's not really about adding things, but it's more about removing things and how you can preserve the essence of your message with the fewest elements possible. So how does that translate on a dashboard? Well, you need to keep things simple. So first advice would be to avoid overloading with information. And sometimes it's tempting. Like we created this super cool chart, we think it will look great in there, but do you actually need that chart? Another piece of advice is if you create a chart on Tableau, by default, it's going to be quite busy. You know, there's going to be grid lines, axis lines, axis labels, legends. Strip it down. It's going to take some time to do it, but the result is definitely going to be worth it. Think as well about your title and headings. Do they support your visual or repeat what the data visualization is going to say? And I mean that's connected to the previous one, but it's really important to think about where you think you repeat yourself. So look at your dashboard, think about, okay, do I actually need this? Do I absolutely need this? And really annotate when it's really, really necessary. Okay, number 3, clarity is key. In advertising, what I learned early on is that it's really hard to get the audience attention, but it's actually harder to retain that attention. And it's actually also really, really easy to lose their attention. And this is why clarity is so key. In advertising, if it's not easy to understand, it's just not working. So when you create data visualization and dashboards, design will play such a key part in gaining that clarity and make sure that your data visualizations are easy to understand. Okay, and that's something that is going to get you there, 80% there in terms of achieving that clarity is selecting the right chart type. If you select the wrong chart type, you're going to confuse and potentially lose your audience very quickly. So how you select the right chart type? Well, it's actually fairly easy, and I'm going to show you how. The first thing you need to understand when you select a chart type is that each chart serves a particular function. There are roughly 6, some say 7 or 8 functions out there. So let me take you through them. If you're looking at, so the function is really what's the purpose of the chart? What is the purpose of the visualization you're going to build? Okay, so for example, if you're looking at comparing cells across different categories, you're in the comparison function. If you're looking to understand whether there's a relationship between sales and profit, you're in the correlation function. And this goes on. For example, if you're looking at to understand how your line of products, how they're distributed in terms of price range, you're in this distribution function. So what is really key here is that when you design a chart, you need to establish that function first, and then the design will follow. Because each chart serves a particular function. And just to be clear, this is not just one chart per function. I'm just showing you basic charts that fit that for each function here. And it's actually a multitude of charts, basic and more advanced charts that serve all these functions. And if you want to learn more about this and understand what's your toolbox in terms of chart types that you can use, I used to share that resource a lot with my students when I was teaching Tableau. It's called DataVis Project. So go on there. It's a repository of all the data visualization, and you can actually filter them by function. So if you're looking at checking what all graphs you can use, charts you can use to depict a comparison function, you just click on it and you'll be able to access this. Andy Kribble also created a visual vocabulary that you can find in Tableau Public. So I've put the link here as well. Okay, so that's number one thing. Each chart serves a function. Okay, there's something else that you need to know in order to pick the right chart, is that some charts are more effective than others. And in order to understand this, I'm going to go into the science of it, and I apologize for this. But in order really to understand why some charts are more effective than others, we need to understand the concept of pre-attentive attributes. So and this might look a bit familiar if you're working on Tableau. You can see, oh, that's actually things I can modify when I actually build a chart. Pre-attentive attributes or visual properties our brain subconsciously processes when looking at a visual. So it's the ability for us to see patterns in image without having to think about it. So these are generally the best ways to present data because we can see the patterns without having to think about it. What I use to give as an example that illustrates what pre-attentive attributes do is to show a table just with data. Okay, so this is a sales and profit table from the Superstore data set. So if I start asking a question about the data, such as what's the highest selling subcategory, or is there any category I should be worried about in terms of profit? Well, you're going to tell me, well, Marion, just give me a minute. I just need to look into this. So it's not going to jump out of you. But look on the right, we visually encoded that data and applied some pre-attentive attributes to it. You can see that the length has been used to compare the sales between the different subcategories by region. And you can see I've also used the U to compare profit. And it's if I ask you the same question, it's going to be so much quicker for you to answer this question. And you're not going to have to think that hard to answer these questions to me. So that's the pre-attentive attributes in action. Okay, but there's a catch here. And this is where, sorry, I'm going more with the research and the academic stuff, but I think they're really valuable to understand. Not all visual encodings work the same. So researchers actually have evaluated the different visual encodings and how effective they are to provide an accurate comparison. So I apologize because the image is quite small, but basically you can see I'm just going to explain to you what that scales is saying, is that when you're on the top of the scale, the visual encoding allows a really accurate comparison. And what the findings were is that if you put something on the horizontal scale and use the length pre-attentive attributes, you're going to be able to make a very accurate comparison between the different data points. And that's why a bar charts, line charts, and are very effective to provide that accurate comparison. If you start going down the scale, you're going to see some pre-attentive attributes that you use, for example, in a pie chart in the angle. And this type of chart are harder for us to make. Our brain is having a harder time to provide an accurate comparison. And you can see here, area which is commonly used when you create a bubble chart is the same. Okay, let's put that into action. So this is two charts with the same data. So the bubble chart is going to work really well if you're just looking to give an approximate comparison. And if you really want to be accurate in some of the comparisons, a bar chart is going to work better. So for example, in the bar chart, I can easily see that group 3 is higher than group 8. But when I look at my bubble chart, it's actually not that obvious. It's harder for us to work this out. Okay, cool. But the problem is that many consider the bar charts and line charts to be a bit boring, and they're not that visually appealing to us. You know, we much rather look at a fancy database. Even so, we know that the best way to represent the data would be potentially to put a bar chart in there. And my piece of advice from this is really about finding the balance. You're going to want to provide that clarity, but also make things appealing. So it's really about balancing both. And I invite you, when you look at this dashboard, to start thinking about how amazing dashboards provide that balance, can provide that visual appeal and that customization, and provide a chart that looks outside of the default bar chart, or combined with more advanced and sophisticated chart, and how actually it makes it really appealing to the eye. Cool. Number 4, well, this is the truth. It's going to take time to build design skills. Well, it's just because, and that's something I learned from advertising as well, it's really hard to set some rules around it. So I don't know if you had this experience where, I don't know if you engage with advertising, and sometimes we look at something and say, oh, that's really good. But it's really hard to it's really impossible at the same time to say why it's really good, and to define constructive rules that tell us how good it is. And I think, and I went to advertising school, and I can tell you, it's not something you learn from a manual. And I find that in many ways, designing a beautiful dashboard is similar. So the approach to learn about effective dashboard design, in my view, is very similar to how I learned about advertising and graphic design. You need to learn the hard skill, of course. I'm not undermining this, but the design skill is almost like learning a craft. These skills are going to emerge from consuming a lot of dashboards, looking at what other dashboard designers are doing, practicing it yourself, and start even to reproduce and start copying things that you like. And something else that actually has emerged as a practice in order to learn design skills that we're starting to see in universities is called visualization criticism. So it's the idea that you look at data visualization and you observe and you start to critique them as you would critique a piece of fine art or a painting. So you look at it, observe it, think about what works, what doesn't, think about how you would do things differently. And just by doing these 3 things, you're going to get better. And if you spend the time to do it and to consume, practice, and critique, you'll get better at it. And I've got to say, working on Tableau, well, you're pretty lucky, because if you want to put this into practice, you've got the perfect place to go. And this is Tableau Public, which is an amazing repository of design and ideas and different ways of representing and creating dashboard. It was an amazing source of inspiration. And if you want to do one thing out of this session, if you want to start your consuming more dashboards, I really recommend you to simply subscribe to the Viz of the Day. Every day you've got a new data visualization in your inbox and you're good to go. Cool, last one. That takes us to our last thing about communicating effectively through data. Well, I've been comparing the field of advertising and data visualization design all throughout this presentation. And I think we just, and there's a last parallel I want to make, but the approach might be slightly different when you work in data visualization. Well, when you work in advertising or data visualization, you've got an ability to influence and shape the message you want to communicate to an audience. And, in advertising, you'll be like, oh, that's great. I'm going to shape, my messaging in a certain way, because obviously I'm trying to convince someone to do something. And this is where I think the exception applies, is that's not what we're trying to do in data visualization and dashboard design. We want to build trust and credibility in the work we do. And I've got actually the perfect example to illustrate this. So this was a chart that was actually released by the Obama administration a year into the new presidency. It showed the job loss during the tail end of the Bush administration through the first part of Obama's administration. Well, if you look at this, the takeout seems pretty clear, in the sense that jobs are on the rise since Obama became president. But this is what happens if you start expanding the window of analysis, and you can see here that a very different story emerged. What I want to point out here, it's very important to know the data you're working with, look at what happened before and after, and put things in context as much as possible. We want to achieve simplicity, but we don't want to be simplistic in our approach. And this is it for me. I've put a few resources. Just want to shout out to FtW, which is an infographic agency based in Denmark. They're amazing. They've got such amazing resources. They build the data viz project I showed you earlier. They've got something called the Designer's Handbook that gives lots of tips around design and data visualization. It's really well built, snackable content, really interesting. So I invite you to have a look at this. A few books in there. Kat Greenbrook, she's a data storyteller and just published a book which contains the Data Storyteller Handbook, contains a lot of visual practical tips about communicating effectively with data. Alberto Caro was a thought leader in the field. And David McAnless, if you haven't come across Information is Beautiful, I invite you to have a look. It's just really nice, beautiful work, and really enjoyable book. Tableau as well. Look, if you've got a learning license on Tableau, there are some actually courses in there that teach you about design best practices. Tableau Public is an obvious one for me as well. And also one last tip. I know Andy Cribble closed the Makeover Monday, but oh my God, there's so much Makeover Mondays that had happened, and I encourage you, if you want to learn how to make new charts and learn about design best practice, just put a Watch Me Viz on YouTube and watch Andy doing things. Like, it's amazing what you would learn through this channel. I will open the floor now to any question, and again, thank you for your time today.
Marion, thank you ever so much for that. Guys, if there's any questions you'd like to ask, please unmute yourself and ask away now. If not, you can always put your questions in the chat for Marion. But Marion, thank you very much. I've just put the Information is Beautiful book by David in the chat for the team.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can share the links with you if you'd like. And also I can see like Grant saying that Makeover Monday is actually started again. That's excellent news.
So yeah, so making them back up again. Marion, thank you very much. I know you've got to shoot, but any questions that come to me, Marion, I can forward to you by email. And again, just to let you all know, guys, this will be recorded. This session's been recorded, so I'll send that out to you, everyone. Marion, thank you very much for that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Right. If you
have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. If you could start sharing your screen, we shall move on to Julia. Oh, there we go. Wow, that's a shocker. Right, Julia, from DataSpark, ways in which we can utilize third-party tools. Julia, I shall hand you out. The floor is yours.
Cool. Thank you, Rob. Yep, so like Rob said, my name is Julia, and I'm an analytics consultant at DataSpark. I'm pretty new to DataSpark. Previously, I was working in analytics roles in the insurance and professional services industries. And then prior to that, I was actually working as a teacher. So I did a bit of a career 180 before kind of landing here. And yeah, the topic of my presentation today is looking at third-party tools, but really just looking at one tool. And the tool I'm going to talk about is Figma. So I'll share my screen and get started. Again, all right, so can you see that, Rob?
Yeah, that's perfect. Again, any questions, guys, stick it in the chat, or and we can go that afterwards after Julia's presentation. But Julia, thank you for that. We can all see that.
Awesome, good. Cool. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about using Tableau with Figma. And here's just a little bit of an agenda, the topics I'm going to go through. So first, just a bit of a brief introduction to Figma as a tool and what it's typically used for. Then I'm going to talk specifically about how we can use Figma with Tableau. And then actually for the bulk of this presentation, I want to do a little bit of a demo, just stepping through in practice how we can actually incorporate Figma into Tableau. And then, yeah, if there's any time left at the end, there'll be a little bit of time for some Q&A. So Figma, if you haven't heard of Figma before, it's basically a tool that's used typically to design user interfaces or to prototype things like websites or phones. It basically just gives users a platform to go in and design different layouts just to kind of get an idea of like visually how their website or app might look before they start that development process. And how we can use this with Tableau basically is we can go in to kind of create this template or this layout for a dashboard. We can export that as an image and then pull it into Tableau. And then kind of layer floating objects on the top of it. And there are a few different kind of use cases for this. So one could just be for prototyping. So even if you don't really want to kind of go through this whole rigmarole of exporting this image, pulling it into Tableau, Figma can still provide a pretty good platform for just kind of experimenting with visual layouts for dashboards. Just so before you go in and start developing, maybe you have a clear idea in your head of how you want your dashboard to look at the end. The second use case, and this is probably more what I've used it for in the past, is kind of building templates with branding. So in a previous organization that I worked for, we used Figma quite a lot. This just kind of helped us to keep a pretty consistent kind of design style across all of our dashboards. So even though we had about 8 of us who were kind of producing Tableau content and distributing it to the business, visually they all looked pretty consistent because we kind of shared this kind of shared folder of all these different Figma layouts that all had the same kind of color schemes and same kind of just like design, logos and all that. And so it kind of helped us as a team to kind of create some consistency. I think this is especially good if you're kind of like me and you don't really have much of an eye for design. This is kind of just like an easy way to bring a little bit of visual enhancement to your dashboards. Another use case can be mobile design. So Figma is quite useful if you're trying to design across kind of multiple layouts. So if you kind of want to have a mobile design separate from a desktop design, you can kind of lay these all out and you can use those as templates in Tableau itself. And then the final one is just the visual enhancement. There's a few little things that you can do in Figma that aren't available natively in Tableau. Some examples you see quite commonly are like maybe you want like rounded edges on your container or some little effects like kind of drop shadows and things like that. Figma can help you do that, whereas that's not really possible just in Tableau itself. So here's just a couple of examples of people who have used Figma with Tableau. So here you can kind of see what I was talking about here. We've got these like rounded edges on the boxes. We've got a little bit of a textured background. We've got some icons. Figma, that's another good feature of Figma, is that there are kind of thousands of icons that people make available for free that you can incorporate into your designs. And yeah, we've got a little kind of toolbar up the top as well. Here's another one. We've got that kind of drop shadow effect going on the side there, and a kind of a navigation bar as well. And again, you can kind of see that slight drop shadow around each of these boxes. So it's not a huge thing, but it just kind of does give your dashboard like a little bit of a, I think, a little bit of a sleeker look. All right, so now I'm basically going to jump into showing you how this all works. So I'm going to start out in Figma. So this is Figma. It's a browser-based tool, and at least in the capacity that I've been using it for Tableau, it's completely free. You just need like a Gmail account or something like that to log in. I think there are a few different kind of login methods. But yeah, you don't need to kind of pay any subscription or anything like that. So to start out with, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and create like a dashboard template that I'm going to bring into Tableau to help me design my dashboard. So I'm going to start with using a frame. So that's my frame. And then I kind of want to size this so that it matches the layout in Tableau. So if I go to my Tableau dashboard, we'll just stick to the kind of the default measurements here. So we're going to be going 1000 by 800. So I'm just going to plug in those numbers here, 1000 by 800. And that kind of gives me the dimensions that I need. I'm going to go for a slight, like a very light kind of Tableau gray there, just for a little bit of texture. Maybe lighter than that, looks good. And then I'm going to kind of just lay out the elements that I want to have in my dashboard on the top. So I think in this case, basically, I'm going to keep it really simple. I want to just have a title. I want to have a single chart, and then I want to have a space for like my filters and legends and things as well. So we're just going to have those 3 different boxes. I'm going to go and draw some rectangles. I'm just going to do it really roughly at first. So this is kind of where my title is going to be. This is where my chart's going to be. And then this is where my like filters and things are going to be. All right, so now we need to kind of neaten this up, and we need to kind of add a few little tweaks. So for my title box, I think overall for the dashboard, I want to kind of set it so that I have 25 pixel margins across the board. So we can kind of do some maths and position this. We're going to do coordinates 25, 25. That'll put it in the right spot. I want it to be about 150 tall. And then in the width, to get those 25 pixel margins, given that we've got 1000 width, we're going to set that to 950, and that should end up where we want it. And we're just going to go through the same process for these. Rather than do some mental math, I'm going to look at some notes I took earlier to make this a little bit faster. So we're going to go same x coordinate 25, y is going to be 200, and then we're going to go 725, 575, and that should end up, yep, got those 25 pixel margins. And then the final one, I'm going to go through the same thing. So we're going to do 1, 2, and then we're going to do 200 wide and 575 high. All right, so this is our basic layout. I don't really like these grays, so I'm going to go change those to just a plain white. I'm going to do that for all of them. And then we're just going to add a few of those kind of little effects that I was talking about earlier. So we can jump in here and we can set, this is kind of the radius for the corners if you want some rounding. So I'm going to put 20 degrees there. I'm going to do that for each of them, 20, 20, 20. And then I'm also going to add this drop shadow effect to all of them. Cool. So this is just my very, very basic layout for a Tableau dashboard. And I'm going to go ahead and export this. I'm going to save it as an image, and then we're going to jump into Tableau and see how we can use it there. So to export it, we just got to make sure we have the frame selected. Then down on the sidebar, there's a button that says export. I'm going to say export frame 1, and that'll just go straight to my downloads folder. All right, so now we're ready to jump into Tableau. So if I jump over here, first thing we need to do is we need to pull that image into our dashboard. So I'm going to get an image object, drag it on, and then I have to choose my image. So in my downloads folder, frame 1, and then we're going to fit center. And there we go. And you'll notice we've got kind of some unwanted like white borders around the edge. That's just because of the automatic padding that Tableau puts on. So I'm just going to go in and remove any of that automatic padding. So we're going to go 0 on the outside container, and then 0 on the image itself, and that kind of gets rid of that. So we've got a much cleaner look now. And then, oh, actually, there's one step in Figma that I want to do before we jump into that, just to make our lives easier. So to make it easy in Tableau to position all of our objects, I think it can be quite a good idea to kind of put little notes of the different coordinates on it. And this is pretty simple to do. So I'm just going to use some little text boxes here. And I'm going to draw here. And then so for this container, we've got 25, 25, 950, 150. So we'll go back again, do my text box. We're going to go x equals 25, y equals 25, and then the width is 950, and the height is 150. And this will just help us when we go back into Tableau to make it much faster to position all of our objects. I'm going to make this a little more subtle, so we're going to go for like a pale gray. Done. And then I'm just going to kind of center this for aesthetic pleasure. And then we're just going to copy that, and we're going to do the same thing for each of the containers. So another one, paste here, and we just go through that same process again. So we've got for this one, 25, 200 for our coordinates. And then our width and height, we got 725 and 575. So I'm just going to pop that in there. 725 and 575. Yep, and then I'm just going to put that again, kind of roughly in the center, just to make it look a bit neater. And then the final one. So for this box, our coordinates are 775 and 200. So I'm going to drop those in there. 25 and 200. And then we've got our width and height are 200 and 575. So I'll pop those in there. 200 and 575. And then, yep, final step. Put that roughly in the middle, which is easier said than done. That'll do. All right, there we go. So I think that's going to make things much easier in Tableau. So I'm going to start again. I'm going to export this one more time, and I'm going to pull that one into Tableau. Export frame 1. It's in my downloads. Jumping in here, and I'm just going to edit this image to the new object. There we go. And now we've got our coordinates there. So the next step to do in Tableau is basically we're going to bring everything on as floating objects, and we're going to position them on the template that we've put together. So I've got this little sheet that I've prepared earlier. I'm going to shift drag to get a floating object. I'm going to get rid of the title because I think that's pretty ugly. And then we're just going to go into layout, and we're going to plug in those numbers. So we just plug in our X coordinate 25, Y is 200, width is 725, and height is 575. Hit enter. Cool, and that's kind of in place now. You'll see that the edges of the sheet are kind of going over our rounded corners, and the easiest way to get rid of that is to just add some padding. I kind of like to put 10 and 10. You could also just bake this in when you're leaving your little notes in Figma so that the padding's not required, but either option is pretty simple. And there we go, we've got our little rounded edges back. And then the next thing we're going to do is build our little filter container. You can see we've got all these filters floating here, but we're going to switch those from floating to not floating, and we're going to pop them in this little container that I've prepared earlier. All right, so we want this not to be floating. It's going to jump right into the container. Perfect. Not floating. That one we're going to have to drag in. Not floating. And then final one, and then we'll put the little legend in there as well, just to kind of keep things neat. So floating. Cool. All right, so this is our filter container. We're going to distribute evenly just to make it look a little bit neater. And then we're going to go ahead and plug in the coordinates that we've got over here. So we've got our X coordinate, which is 775. We've got our Y coordinate, which is 200. We've got our width, which is 200 also, and then our height, that's 575. We'll hit enter. Cool, there it is. And so again, we've got a couple of small cosmetic issues to deal with. We want to put that padding on to make sure that we're not kind of overlapping those rounded corners. So I'm going to do the same thing, 10 and 10. And then you can see our little dimensions poking through. So to get rid of that, we've just got to make sure that we have a solid background here. So we'll set that to white, and then those disappear. So now we have our chart, and we've got our filter bar. The final thing to do is to create our little title. So again, I'm going to use a floating container for that. I'm going to do a title and then put a little logo in there as well. So this is my container, and then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in my title. I'm just going to call it Sales Dashboard. Then I'm going to just center that, bold, make it a little bit bigger. We'll go 36 and a little bit darker. Cool, and that's our title. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in our logo. So I'm going to go drag image. And then I've got a little logo that I got ChatGPT to prepare earlier for my miscellaneous sales dashboard. Drag that, make it a bit of a better size. Cool. Right, so that's basically a pretty simple title. That's all we need. So then we're going to go ahead and go through that same process of positioning it up where the title element that we built is. So we go into layout. Again, put our X and Y coordinates in 25, 25. Width we've got 950 and height is 150. Then we just go through the same tidying up process we went through before. So we're going to add that padding to make sure we don't lose our rounded corners. And then we're going to add a solid white background so that we don't see those little markings popping through. And there we go. That's basically it. That's just like a really simple way that you can use Figma to create kind of templates for your dashboards. This is in my previous organization. This was kind of the exact style that we used. We just had a whole kind of collection of different layouts with like maybe there was one, if you wanted to have 2 charts on a dashboard, we created a template that had kind of 2 spaces there. And then kind of if we were developing something and we realized that there wasn't an existing template, we would just kind of go into Figma, make that, add it to the shared folder, and then we just kind of had this pool of templates that people could go in and use, and just kind of really helped us to create that a bit more of a slick design, because you know most kind of data analysts and BI analysts don't necessarily have that kind of design knowledge and design background. And I think we found that this was just a really simple way to make just really ordinary dashboards pop a little bit and make them a little bit more visually appealing to our end users in the business. There's just a couple of other little things I want to show you in Figma before we wrap up. So like I said, this is just a really simple one, simple background. You might remember in our PowerPoint slide, you can just kind of see this example here that someone's built where they've got this kind of blue textured background here. And stuff like that's also really easy to use in Figma itself. So for example, if we want to do something similar to that, I can jump in, I can say, I'm going to search for blue textured background, and I can just pick an image here, say, yep, this looks pretty good. Save the image to my desktop. I'll save it in the download folder. I'm going to call it blue. And then I can jump into Figma and I can bring that in. So I go place image, I'm going to get my blue, open it up, and then I'm just going to overlay it here. Basically, we can, it's a bit pixely, but you'll get the idea. And then we can do send back. And just through that process, that's given us this like slightly more textured background that you can't really do so easily in Tableau itself, but it's pretty easy to do here. And you can kind of, like I've experimented before using like ChatGPT to kind of create custom images and things for backgrounds. So it's definitely getting easier, I think, for kind of people without a design background to kind of get a bit more creative and experimental with their dashboard layouts. One final thing I wanted to share in Figma is the icons that you can use. So I mentioned before that there's a lot of freely available icons in Figma. These are these tend to be plugins that are kind of made by users and shared with the community. So if you go in here, we've got plugins open. So this is an icon set that I downloaded earlier. And then here we've just got kind of, there's 223 icons in this set, and just kind of scroll down. If you want to use one, you just double click. And then you can kind of drag it around and just put them wherever you want. Actually, you only need to single click, otherwise you end up with 2, apparently. Whoops. Yep. And so these can be really useful if you're trying to design a more visually appealing dashboard. You don't necessarily want to go through the whole process of importing shapes and things into Tableau. This is a pretty quick way to just get some of those basic icons that might be useful to you in your business. Cool. And I think that's basically it for me. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, thank you for your time.
Yeah, Julia, thank you very much for that. We've got Rob Nayman has put something in to know, has anyone tried the new Figma to Tableau plugin at all? Have you tried that, Julia?
I have not. No, I've read a little bit about it, but haven't given it a go.
Okay, well, if anyone else has, then let us know. We can certainly update you on that. So, Julia, thank you very much for that. Yeah, guys, if you have any questions in the chat or email me, and I will pass them on to Julia. She works with myself in DataSpark, so that'd be an easy conversation to have. But Julia, thank you very much. And I think I think of all the live demos I've seen, that's probably been the best one I've seen without any issues. So that's awesome. Thank you for that, Julia. Really
Thanks, Rob.
And thank you very much for your time. Right, guys, I'm going to share my screen and just let you know a couple of closing things from me here and the guys. Thank you very much for Julia and Marion. We have something, MuleSoft, we've got something in the public sector Wednesday, December 6th, Stone Chalk Lot 14, if you want to go to that. You're more welcome to go along. I think there's the way you put it into your Google or search engine, you'll be able to find out some details about that. But yeah, they've got that going on. We have a merch giveaway, and the online tombola came up with Aaron Robinson. So Aaron, if you'd like to drop me your email details and postage details, rob@dataspark.com is my email. Chuck me your details, Aaron. You've won some stuff. We'll go around the office and find out what we don't want. I was only joking. We've got some stuff from Tableau for you. So give us your details, Aaron, and we will send some on your way. The next event here will be February. So if anyone wants to join in, or anyone's got anything for us, please let us know. It's recorded. I will send the recording out to you next couple of days. From me here, have a very good Christmas, have a good festive season. Enjoy yourselves, guys. Thank you very much for coming along. A big thank you to Julia, and a big thank you to Marion for their presentations. Anything else you need, drop us a line. But from me and the user group, this is the November one done and dusted. Take care, everyone. I shall see you soon. Bye.